justice for all.
Moment of silence, please. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hawes.
Here.
Ms. Howe.
Here.
Mr. Kelleher.
Here.
Mr. Perry.
Here.
Ms. Sedman.
Here.
Mr. Schnee. Mr. Urban. Ms. Wakes.
Present.
Mr. McGinley.
Present.
We have 8 present and 2 on the phone.
We have 2 members on the phone, both of which have reached the 3 call-in limit. So we'll start with first Mr. Vo, who was called in first. We have a motion to have Mr. Vo participate in tonight's meeting.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Kelleher. Second was Mr. Haas. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Any in opposition? None heard. Mr. Vo is now part of the meeting. Mr. Berminski is also on the phone. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Ms. Hauk?
Second.
Second. Ms. Wakes? On the motion, all in favor of Mr. Berminski participating by phone indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Motion carries at both now present. There are no recognitions or ceremonial proclamations. On additions and deletions, number 2 on our voting agenda will be deleted because some of the information has not been forwarded to us at this point that we need to have in order to vote on this TRAN for 2019. So number 2 will be deleted. Any other additions or deletions? If not, do we have a motion to adopt the agenda with that deletion?
So moved.
Ms. Wakes and Ms. Saban. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Motion carries. Moving down to agenda items. Motion to approve the minutes from November 27th.
Public comment.
Public comments?
Oh, sorry. You're right. Public comment before we get to the agenda items. Do we have anyone who was indicated?
No.
No one was slipped. Mr. Shiner, you would like to go to the podium, please?
Good evening. On your agenda this evening, you have 2 different items. One relates to Mr. Courtdale, and one relates to a company called City Tower LLC. And I'm going over the resolution and reading it, and it states the county will reimburse the Commonwealth for the Commonwealth's share of any expenditure related to the project found to be ineligible under the grant program by the Commonwealth. And it also says that it's further resolved and understood that the parties will reimburse the county. But I don't see any attached contract to that effect. I don't see any signatures from those entities. Now, Misericordia, well, they've been around for a long time. City Tower, they don't even list who their corporate offices are on their website, on their for the state. So I think you really need to, if we're going to put the public of this county responsible for these grants, or any portion of them, I think you need to have that in a separate document in writing before you approve these. Also, in the convention center appointment, I know you wouldn't appoint my number 1 choice, so I'll give you my number 2 choice, and that would be Amanda Yackas. I believe her credentials are in hotel management, and I think she'd be an added asset to that organization. Also, as you proceed tonight to discuss budget amendments, I'd like you to keep a few things in mind. Back in 2012, the county manager told us that we had to give division heads a higher salary because we'd be eliminating all the outside consulting. Well, we haven't seen that too much yet. There are also some different projects, most recently the $50,000 renovation to the back entrance of this courthouse that turned into $186,000. There's the Records Retention Center that was estimated to cost $1.3 million. And while it's a beautiful facility and something we definitely needed, along with the addition of the coroner and the morgue, that ballooned up to $2.8 million. The people of this county, while $18 on 100,000 for a 3% increase may not seem much to most of you, is a lot to people who can't afford it. People who are living on fixed incomes, disabled people, and so on, the elderly, they don't have the money. They're now deciding whether they want to eat or buy their medicine, or do either because they have to pay all the other bills as everything goes up, including the added approximate $60 stormwater runoff bill that will be coming out in 2019. By your own sheriff's reports, he's expecting a revenue increase of 5% in one of the categories, up $15,000, which he said has been increasing every year due to more homes being sold at sheriff's sale as a result of foreclosures. This county needs efficiency. We need to eliminate the incompetence. We put $150,000 into a new website and we can't even get election day added as a calendar item. The new charter, the amended charter, was finally put up, but it's the copy that you cannot search or copy from, and the original charter was taken down. I think you need to look at these things in every one of these divisions and departments before you start granting extra money this year to end up with the same work product. Also, I think you should look at the district attorney office's budget, because the courts are getting a raise of about 1.6%, which means you're going to have to increase the district attorney's budget by about $3,000 to accommodate her increase in salary, unless you just want to let it go, and maybe she'll use that as something to challenge the violations of our charter, because she doesn't seem to want to do any of that for any of the other things, but maybe when it comes to her salary, she will. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Okay, moving down to approval of minutes from November 27th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Ms. Saban, do we have a second? Second. Mr. Perry, on the question? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard, motion carries.
Abstain.
Mr. Bermeski abstains. Moving down to agenda items under the county manager. A motion to adopt a resolution authorizing county manager to execute a lease agreement amendment with Whitehaven Borough for the existing 911 communication tower, shelter, and equipment. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Haas? Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Wakes? On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bermensky?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Number 2, we deleted. We're going out over to this back page. Number 3, these 2 resolutions, number 3 and number 4, are resolutions we have approved earlier this year because of a request in regards to some language. Is that correct, Ms. Rocomo?
Correct. I was contacted by Chris Cowley, and I'll speak to both resolutions together. Resolution 2018-81 and 82, which were adopted on May 8th of 2016, spoke to a grant application for projects on 8 West Market Street and Misericordia College. The changes relative to these projects is to rename the cooperation agreements as cooperation indemnity agreements, modify the language where it's required to reference current total grant awards for each project, and to include the language regarding the county reimbursement to the Commonwealth for ineligible grant expenditures, which requires, this requirement is contained in the original grant agreement, which was addressed in May, and is contained under the special conditions. And that cooperation and indemnity agreement would transfer responsibility to the grant beneficiaries of the projects, and they would indemnify the county. And they were in the original grant applications that were covered by resolutions 2018, 81, and 82.
So in regards to Mr. Shiner's request,
That was encompassed in the original grant application and cooperation agreement. The resolution needed to be amended to address these basically 3, maybe 4 items.
okay. We have a motion on number 3.
So moved.
Ms. Saidman,
Second.
Mr. Kelleher. Questions?
So just in English, Ms. Crocomo, then basically it's just,
It's a pass-through, and we will be reimbursed by the beneficiaries if there is any issue or amounts that we need to expend.
I know we've done these kind of projects before, most recently I think the Wilkes University science wing down there it was called. Again, when these things come up again, I know it's no skin off our nose. We're just a pass-through.
We're just a
nonetheless-
pass-through, and its language, the language in the resolution has to reflect the language in the grant.
And again, I was just going to say that, our universities enjoy tax-exempt status, yet they enjoy a lot of county-funded services. 911, EMA, magisterial courts, there are these infrastructure improvements. If the leadership of these institutions could really come and help us with some payments in lieu of taxes, just like the downtown universities do with Wilkes-Barre, it would be most appreciated. It would make supporting something like this very easy to do. I want to see them succeed. They're an economic engine, but nonetheless, there is a cost to all these things. And Misericordia University is expanding. It's gobbled up all the neighboring area there, and the costs are going up all the time. And I know I'm again, beating the drum, but I just wish, on the county's end, we could negotiate this going in front of when these agreements come to the table, if they could really go and ask, because if you don't ask, you don't get. And I'm just sick and tired of not getting. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Howe.
Yeah, I would just say that, we do have a procedure where we usually discuss things at a work session. We had a work session a week ago. This was not on the agenda. It wasn't discussed at all until tonight. And we're going to have another meeting next week. I mean, I think it would be helpful if we didn't find out about something and have a discussion and then be expected to vote on it. And this has been a discussion among council for several years. I mean, we entered into the procedure that we have about discussing it at a work session before it comes to a vote, specifically because people complained about being faced with an instant vote. And I get it. It's something that's necessary to do, but it would have been nice to hear about it last week before,
If I'd known.
Well,
And
and you
also
couldn't wait till next week? We have
Also,
another meeting next week.
Also, we have already approved this with the exception of the language changes. This is
Well, I
not
know.
something that's new.
Okay.
This
but
is not something new.
The first item that we have here, yeah, but it's from May. I mean, who remembers May?
I would hope
and-
everybody here.
Okay, so.
You voted for the original resolution. It was unanimous.
It's fine. I understand, and I said it's not an issue of the matter that we're going to vote on. It's an issue of procedure. The first item was a lease agreement amendment, and we discussed that at the work session last week, and that was an amendment to something. So I would just appreciate it if we could be a little more consistent with our procedure.
We have a motion, we have a second. Anyone else with a question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Ms. Helk,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Ms. Sedman,
Yes.
Mr. Schnee,
Yes.
Mr. Vogt,
Yes.
Ms. Wakes.
Yes.
Mr. Berminski,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley,
Yes.
unanimous.
Moving down to number 4, motion to adopt the resolution, amending the resolution approving City Tower LLC Cooperation and Indemnity Agreement for grant funding for the 8 West Market Street redevelopment City Tower project, and authorizing the Luzerne County to reimburse the Commonwealth for Commonwealth's share of ineligible costs incurred. We have a motion? Mr. Keller? Do we have a second? Second, Mr. Sneed. On the question?
Yep.
Yes.
Mr. Shiner's statement about you can't find them in the phone book or on any website or et cetera. Is that something we should be concerned about, or is that a,
Well, going back to May,
okay,
I believe...
I don't think I was here.
There were representatives here.
Yes.
And there were, the entities were vetted at that time. They're reputable entities.
Okay,
And they do have an association with our local chamber.
okay.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes,
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion carries. Going down to number 5, motion to introduce an ordinance amending the Luzerne County zoning map to rezone a 2.153 acre parcel of property in Huntington Township from Suburban Residence District S1 zone to Highway Business District B3 zone. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Perry? Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Kelleher, on the question. On the question. This is an introduction of a ordinance, so we need 4 affirmative votes for it to move forward. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
yes,
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. Thank you. Moving down to number 6, authority boards and commissions, nominations and appointment. Our last meeting, we accepted a resignation from Mr. Conyngham. And this evening, we'll hopefully be appointing someone to fill out that term for Mr. Conyngham, which would have go to December 31st, 2020. We need a motion to open up nominations.
So moved.
Mr. Kelleher,
second,
second, Ms. Wakus. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. Nominations are now open.
I'd like to nominate Eugene Rafali,
For Folly?
paying special note to his first name.
Okay. Mr. Keller makes the nomination. Do we have a second to that?
yes,
Second, Mr. Perry. Other nominations?
I
What
nominate.
is this for now? What is, please?
This is for the Convention Center Authority.
I nominate
Okay,
James
I
Reno.
nominate James Reno.
Okay.
Okay, I'll second it.
You okay? Mr. Reno makes the nominations. Mr. Berminski, seconded by Ms. Hauk. Any other nominations?
I nominate Mr. Biscontini.
Mr. Biscontini. That's Matt Foe. Do we have a second? Hearing none, that nomination fails.
Motion to close nominations, Mr. Chair?
Okay, Mr. Haas moves to close nominations. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Second, Ms. Wakus. All in favor of closing nominations indicate by saying aye.
aye,
Aye.
Any in opposition? Any abstentions? None heard. We'll now have a roll call vote. Indicate we have 2 nominees, Mr. Rafali and Mr. Reno. Indicate your choice. And when your name is called, please.
Mr. Perry?
Mr. Rafali.
Ms. Sedman?
Mr. Rafali,
Mr. Schnee?
Mr. Rafali.
Mr. Vogt?
Mr. Rafali?
Ms. Wakus?
Mr. Rafali.
Mr. Berminski?
Reno.
Mr. Haas?
Mr. Reno.
Ms. Hauk?
Reno.
Mr. Kelleher?
Rafali.
Mr. McGinley?
Mr. Rafali. 7-3. Mr. Rafali is nominated by 7-3 vote. We need a motion now to submit a resolution for Mr. Rafali's seat on the board.
So moved.
Mr. Kelleher,
second,
second, Ms. Saban. On the question, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Sedman?
yes,
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Perminsky?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. 9-1, motion carries. She has a group of 7 o'clock for what? Oh, okay. That's all right. No problem. Okay, we're moving down to number 7, which is going to take us a little bit of time. And if everybody would get the information that has been sent out to you, and also with your documents, there is information that was forwarded today via emails from different departments and divisions and offices. I understand Ms. Kirkland tells me that Mr. Greenwald has a speaking engagement at 7 o'clock with a group that's here with Judge Rogers. So we'll be looking at the Public Defender's Office first, so that he can make his 7 o'clock appointment with the group with Judge Rogers.
Mr. Chair, as we go through the amendments, with your permission, I'd like either the department heads or the division heads to come up to the podium if there are any questions.
That'd be fine. So we need the Public Defender.
Is that one of the new sheets?
No, the Public Defender is Division 80. Mr. Greenwald is now at the podium. Well, my hope is that possibly we can do it at least by department or division. And in this case, we can do it maybe by office because there's only 3 proposed amendments. Okay. With the information in front of you, in the expense line items, 550.47 repairs of maintenance equipment, machinery and equipment. The proposed number in the budget is $6,000. We believe that would be a one-time expense, and if we approve the one-time expenses, that would be taken out of the budget. Going down to the next line item, 560.17, examinations and witnesses. Mr. Greenwald had made a request or proposal of $100,000, and the amendment is for $90,000, which would be a differential of $10,000. And then line 599.46, machinery and equipment greater than $5,000. It's a $6,400 expenditure. Again, we believe that could be a one-time expense, and if that is done, this $6,400 would be removed from the budget and put into one-time expenses. Mr. Greenwald, you want to speak to anything at this point?
Well, I would just explain again that the $6,000 in 550.47 is primarily to be used for a high-speed scanner. It is something that the office needs. We have 2 right now, one of which is, I want to use the expression, kind of on its last legs. Once they become out of warranty, just as an example, we have that one repaired. I think about a year ago it was $1,000 just to repair it. The other line item, 599.46, it's our intention to replace, we have hope to begin a program, a 3-year program of replacing what are 12 to 15-year-old laptop computers. The laptops are aged pretty well and really not of much use to us anymore. We'd like to replace those with what's called thin clients. With regard to the examination of witnesses, you'll recall that I appeared in front of you several times to request a transfer out of the county reserve. The reason that that number that was proposed was $100 is that represents a good portion of that money that the board or the council authorized be removed or withdrawn from the reserve and added to that line item for the one death penalty case that's still pending. So I appeared in front of you 3 times over a period of 6 weeks. You authorized that transaction, and now you want to take some of the money back. So that particular line item doesn't really make sense to me.
Well, the transaction that you referred to was in regards to the 2018 budget expenses.
Right, but the money...
This is for 2019 budget,
There
correct?
was no, and if you recall, I was here maybe just a few months ago. It wasn't January of 2018. That money hasn't been used. We've made every effort to try to use, but I can't anticipate what the Commonwealth's case is going to be to that degree where I'm going to use all the money that's transferred. So, I mean, I'm thinking it's not the board's intent or the council's intent that I come back and make that request a second time.
The $80,000 transfer that you requested and received. At this point, you say that's not used?
It hasn't been used totally, no.
So at the end of the year, where is that money going to reside?
Well, my understanding is that council sweeps any money that's left in any line item and puts it in the reserve. So the answer is you do.
I believe that is correct. So unless you have bills and things to encumber against it.
Well, I do have bills to encumber. I have encumbered probably half of that, but not the entire $80,000.
Okay.
I mean,
Any questions for Mr. Greenwald?
Does he understand that the machinery, we're not saying he can't replace it, that's going to be hopefully a one-time expense?
Yeah, there is a list we have of one-time expenses that includes those two items.
Just want to make sure he understands that.
well, I do understand that to a certain degree, but for example, there's we had some discussion this afternoon or this evening about the storage retention building. As part of that, the public defender's storage of old files, we had to buy file storage. We had to buy racks and shelving. That came out of 550.47. So we anticipate the same type of expense going forward.
But the scanner is the one that's at 550.47 now, correct?
The scanner is primarily that expense, but but if you take both those numbers away, if you deduct 12.4, where am I going to get the money to buy the shelving? I think we spent about $1,500 this year on shelving, and I know I'm going to spend about the same amount next year.
Well, I believe shelving could also be a one-time expense, to be honest with you, because hopefully you don't have to rebuy that shelving every year.
Well, I'm sure eventually that building is going to get filled, but you know my office, it's a never-ending stream. So files come in, files have to come out. I mean,
Okay. Questions for Mr. Graham? Ms. Seddon?
Yeah, I'm kind of confused on, I mean, we're taking the $100,000 for your examination of witnesses and cutting that by 10,000, and you had talked about the 80,000, I think, from last year, right?
There was a transfer of $80,000 into that account.
And you haven't used all that, right?
I have not used all that, and I think I was last year probably around September, August or September.
So, taking $10,000 away from your 2019 doesn't seem very significant.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me to go through the process we talked about of appearing 3 different times over the space of 6 weeks, you guys giving me or agreeing to transfer the money, and now just because it hasn't been spent, taking it back and basically putting me in the position where I have to come back again. I mean, quite frankly, if we wanted to, if you look at the DA's budget, their number for that same line item is $130,000. And that was the proposed number. Right, that was the proposed number, and you're looking to take a similar number away from them, 120. So the DA's office, the public defender's office has the same needs in regards to examination of witnesses as the DA's office. So to treat the public defender's office differently than the DA's office, I don't really quite understand that.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Greenwald? Okay, thank you. We have a motion in regards to the budget amendments.
So moved.
Ms. Saban, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Kelleher? On the question?
I again want to make sure that when we're talking about 6,000 being taken out for those two line items, that does not mean that the money is not going to be there for those line items. I want to make sure Mr. Greenwald understands that.
Maybe I don't. My understanding is that that money will be here for the remainder of the year for 2018, but not for 2019.
Well, we'll know at the end of the meeting.
Well, the proposal is to zero out those two line items.
Yes, but to make them one-time expenses.
So that amount would have to be encumbered in 2018.
Yes. Okay. Questions?
So essentially what the proposal is here, the Public Fairness Office is going to use the surplus they have from this past year's budget to pay for these items in 2019.
If the council supports that.
Okay.
But there's no surplus in either one of those line items.
I'm not talking about your particular department or division. It's talking about the budget surplus.
Now I'm confused about that.
What
do you mean the budget surplus?
2018 budget has about $5.9, $5.8 million surplus currently.
Fantastic.
That's what we're looking at, what I think the proposal is. Okay? Other questions? Roll call, please.
This is on the three.
On
as
three,
presented.
as presented.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
One.
Okay, motion carries in that regard. Going back to the packet now that Mr. Greenwald has his appointment. The top sheet there is an amendment that was submitted by Ms. Hauk in regards to the county council budget. Ms. Hauk, you want to speak to that and make a motion first, I guess?
Well, yeah, I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a second to that?
Second.
Mr. Brzezinski? Go ahead. Ms. Hauk.
Well, there's no change in the bottom line. It just changes, it would add a line item for special legal services and put $1,000 into that line item and decrease advertising and miscellaneous expenses by $500, which seems to be within what they were for 2018.
Questions for Ms. Hauk?
What would we need that for?
Well, there have been many times over the past 7 years where we've heard from various citizens and from various council members that there are times when council might need its own legal representation or to get a legal opinion outside of the Office of Law, since the solicitor works for the manager and is hired by the manager and is under the supervision of the manager. That if there are times when the manager's opinion and the council's opinion may differ, that we might need an outside opinion. And I just think we should prepare for that contingency.
I'd like to note for the record that the charter specifically indicates that the Office of Law represents Luzerne County.
That's true. Yet every division has a line for special legal services. So should Division 10.
Any other discussion? I would just like to say on my behalf that obviously the council has control of the budget, and at any point in time we can add or delete or change the budget. And if the feeling is at some point in time, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, we certainly could put money into any line item that we wish. I strongly believe that the Office of Law represents us, and I would think that that's something we should support.
I'm not saying the Office of Law doesn't represent us.
No, I understand what you said. I'm just offering my opinion. Thank you. We have a motion from Ms. Hauk, second from Mr. Brzezinski. Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Vogt?
No.
Ms. Wakes?
No.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
No.
Mr. Perry? I'm sorry.
No.
Ms. Sedman?
No.
Mr. Sneed? No. Mr. McGinley?
No. Thank you. Moving to the District Attorney's Office. We have a memo from the District Attorney's Office that you have a copy of. We have just a one-page information there. Accept the motion to accept the budget amendments as presented. Do we have a motion to that?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Kelleher, do we have a second to Mr. Kelleher's motion?
Second.
Ms. Wickes?
I just want to make sure I'm making a motion to accept the amendments as proposed, right?
You accept the amendments. A motion to accept the amendments listed on that page.
Yep.
And everybody has a copy of the memo from the District Attorney's Office, correct?
I just received this memorandum late this evening. I forwarded it to all county council via email when I got it.
Yeah, and they have copies at their
Okay,
desk.
this one here.
Yeah.
I again want to make sure. We're talking about this one or the one that's
We're
here?
talking about this, the one that was sent out as a part of your packet.
Yes, okay, that's what I made the motion for.
Questions?
I mean, just comments about this one. I know we're, District Attorney, you know, we've been pretty rough on that office over these past few years. I'm seeing the proposal is actually $11,000 less than last year's budget. I don't know who made these amendments, but I don't know if somebody could offer a rationale for these cuts.
The amendments?
Yes.
If you look at the top one, which is the revenue amendment, if you look at the history of the revenue for that particular line item, I think $110,000 is about in line with what the past history has been. Going down to the expense side, wages overtime is just a reduction there. Move down to the $50,000 level from $60,000. Special legal services, a reduction from $5,000 down to $2,500. It's not used very often. Mileage from $10,500 to $8,000. I think you'll find if you look at the mileage information, that's about in line. Capital cases, 110 versus 70. I think the request last year was for $10,000. This would give them a $60,000 increase over last year's budget. Examinations and witnesses from 130 down to 120 is a small change. And meeting, conference, and training, 18,000 down to 15,000, seems to be in line with pretty much their expenditures.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Ms. Wickes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
No.
Ms. Howe?
No.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Sneed?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
No.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. 6-4, motion carries. Moving to Division 13, the courts. Mr. Schakowsky is here with us. You have a proposal regards to district justice courts, the courts themselves, domestic relations, and on the next page,
May I
probation
save
services.
time and just say which ones we have a comment on?
Excuse me?
May I save time and just say which ones we have a comment on? Because there's very few we would comment on.
That'd be fine.
All right.
You want to start with the district justice courts, I think?
No, that's, of course, what we
Okay.
agreed upon last time. On the courts, I just want to point out on the capital cases that it's, of course, it's a rolling of the dice, and we hope that we're not going to have to go over that amount of money, but of course, we all don't know what will happen in murders in the future, and that's fine to change it. Just know that if we have a problem, we'll come back to council at the time.
Okay.
Juror cost, the figure that we had of $200,000, I think was a good estimate. I do understand it's an estimate. And again, if we go over that, we would have to do something else.
Okay.
The one I do have a great concern with, however, is 560.25 on transcripts, where it's being reduced from $70,000 to $45,000. As of yesterday, when I ran the report, we have spent $87,595 on transcripts. And I think there's a little bit misunderstanding as to what these transcripts really are. We are mandated by law that whenever somebody is sentenced and there's a potential of jail time, that we must have a transcript of the sentencing. We're also mandated by law to have for post-conviction relief hearing the entire documents of all the proceedings transcribed. So these eventually become mandated legal documents, get filed in the clerk of court's office and elsewhere. It's not a tool that's used by judges for fun to review or people look at. It is a mandated service that we have. And again, you see the $87,000, and that's directly related to, we've had probably more guilty pleas this year than we've taken in our entire history of the court system.
Okay.
But to explain what that one is, and I would ask that that one be eliminated.
But if I could, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I recall in your discussion, Mr. Shkusky, that there was a vacant position this past year that normally carried out the work of that transcript, right, if I'm not mistaken?
I'm sorry, sir.
As regarding the transcripts, you say there was a vacant position, you were using outside help to carry out that function.
Yes.
So this year, that should be taken care of in the general
We
budget,
anticipate
correct?
filling that position very soon.
Right. So once that's
We've been
filled
using a
in,
per diem person for the fill-in, yes.
so then wouldn't that justify then a reduction in that line item, since that'll be covered in-house?
No, these are the transcripts we have to, the transcript you took out of the transcript cost, that we have to pay for the transcript cost. These, we reimbursed our court reporters the transcript cost.
Oh, so it's for the document itself, just for the accessing
Yes, we have to
of
pay
the
under
document.
law. We pay so much per page per item that's mandated, and the fees are set by the state. We have no discretion on what those charges are.
Okay, thank you.
The only other one I wish to point out is on the probation services, is that reduction in the meeting, conference, training fees, and just point out that was a $25,000 where we agreed to have it go to $20,000. Another $2,000 would be a real burden. That fee is used to pay for our use of force training, where we send our new employees, their probation officers, down to Harrisburg for a 3-day seminar on guns and weapons and use of force. And then we also bring a trainer up every 6 months to retrain everyone in our facility. So that's exactly what that's for, and I'd say that's money that is a good solid number, the $20,000. All the other proposals we have worked together on, and I have no further comment on those, and I have no issue with any of those at this time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Questions for Mr. Shkusky before he sits back down? Okay. Let's take a motion in regards to the district justice courts. Do we have a motion in regards to that amendment?
Division 13 you're talking about?
No, it's not.
Boy.
Okay. Excuse me?
No, I just want to make sure.
Okay, we need a motion for the district justice courts, the amendment that's proposed.
So moved.
Mr. Perry, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Howe? On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Perminsky?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman? No. Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Point of order, are we voting on the First Amendment or the second?
We're voting on the district courts
Oh, I'm sorry.
only, and there's
Okay,
only one
yes.
amendment there?
Thank
Okay.
you, yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
8 to 2.
Oh, wait a
8 to
minute.
2.
Excuse me, so you were on Division 13 only?
Only Department 4183
4183,
districts.
and I'd like to change my vote if possible to yes.
Okay. Makes it 9-1, I guess.
Correct.
9-1 instead of 8-2. Motion carries. Now we'll go down to Department 4184, the courts.
Okay, I suggested those, Mr. Chair, if I may. I'd like to submit them as written with the exception of line item 560.25 transcripts. could restore the 25,000 to zero
So-
that out.
So no amendment then for 560.25?
Correct, and the others would stand as originally stated.
Okay, everybody understand Mr. Haas's motion? Do we have a second for Mr. Haas's motion?
Second.
Ms. Segman? Any questions? Roll call, please.
This is on the First Amendment of that department.
What do you want
Wait a
to do
minute.
for?
So
first column.
you're staying all the First Amendments because there is one other amendment on the mileage.
Or to drop that down to, if you want me to roll that, I'd be happy to do that as well, to include the second, for line item 550.29 mileage,
Yes.
to bring that down to 100. So 2 changes, eliminate,
Okay, now you have.
yes,
so-
forgive me, do I have to retract? Let me know what the point order is.
Well, I think your first motion was the First Amendment, so that's the way I interpreted what you
Why don't I
said.
just stick with that, and we can always do the second
Okay.
one after that.
So we're staying
Sorry
with
about
all the amendments and line item under First Amendment, correct? Okay, everybody clear?
Other than, Mr. Haas's amendment is taking
Transcripts out.
transcripts back
That's
to
right.
the original.
Leave it at $70,000.
Okay, all
No reduction there.
Okay.
Okay, everybody clear? Very good. Ms. Haas, Ms. Segman, second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Ms. Hauk,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Ms. Sedman,
Yes.
Mr. Schnee,
Yes.
Mr. Vogt,
Yes.
Ms. Wakus,
Yes.
Mr. Berminski,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes,
Unanimous.
unanimous. Moving down to Department 4187, Domestic Relations.
So we're just not doing anything with the 100. That's because we've approved this, we're not doing anything.
Unless somebody makes a motion.
You want to do that Second Amendment?
Yeah.
Mr. Haas?
Yeah, I'll make the, for this one, to include all the amendments in the first column, in the First Amendment column, with the exception of line item 560.68 miscellaneous expense.
No, I think, Mr. Haas, excuse me, my error.
Sorry.
We had the 2 amendments in regards to mileage.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to make a second amendment there, or do you want to move on?
I'll make the Second Amendment.
Go ahead. You make the amendment to move the mileage down to 100?
To amend the original amendment, exactly, of the reduction of 200, let it now stand at 100.
Do we have a second for Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Sedman? On the question? Roll call, please.
Ms. Hauk,
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Ms. Sedman,
Yes.
Mr. Schnee,
Yes.
Mr. Vogt,
Yes.
Ms. Wakus,
Yes.
Mr. Berminski,
Yes.
Ms. Hauk,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay. So you had one additional amendment there. The mileage is now $100 instead of the first amendment, which was $200, and the proposed number was $250. So going down to Department 4187, Domestic Relations. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Schnee. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Perry. Your motion's for the first amendments under, the amendments under amendment number 1? Mr. Schnee? Okay. Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Ms. Sedman,
Yes.
Mr. Schnee,
Yes.
Mr. Vogt,
Yes.
Ms. Wakus,
Yes.
Mr. Berminski,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Ms. Hauk,
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Motion carries. Moving over to the next page, Probation Services, Department 4237.
Mr. Chair, the Second Amendment on the domestic relations is not, we just don't do anything with that, we're just leaving it the First Amendment.
Unless somebody else makes a motion, which we can go back and revisit. Okay?
Okay?
Very good. Probation Services, Department 4237. Do we have a motion on the proposed amendments? Now we have line 1 and 2. There are several amendments on both lines.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve all the line item changes in the First Amendment column.
Mr. Haas makes that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Perry. Questions? I will say that the one area that I'm looking at that I think has a point which we should visit is the repairs and maintenance of buildings, 550.45, from 25,000 down to 10,000. I would support a reduction down to the 20,000. I believe that's more in line with what the needs are with that building, which is Penn Place.
What I know, Mr. Chair, when the discussion took place, that was one of the big issues was carpeting. To put that for next year, I think we can slide that perhaps into that one-time fee if there's leftover monies in that department for this year. Perhaps we can slide into that and trim this budget down for 2019.
Okay, that was your motion, right?
Original motion, yep.
Anyone else? Questions, comments?
Is there a problem with the roof there?
Penn Place? I don't believe so.
No.
Mr. O'Neill's here, so if there is, Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Keller, I said, is there a problem with the roof at Penn Place?
No, the roof was just replaced this past year.
Okay, so there are any major things that have to be done there?
With regard to the roof,
Anything in that building?
we have a project going on right now. There's nothing that comes to mind immediately, but
Okay, so what's going on now is in this year's budget.
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion, Mr. Haas, second by Mr. Perry for the column under the First Amendment. Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
No.
8-2.
Motion carries. I would offer a second amendment that we go with the on line 550.45 repairs and maintenance building to go to 20,000 as the second amendment versus the 10,000 that was approved by the First Amendment. That's my motion. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Ms. Wakus? On the question?
And I'd like to carpet the whole county if at all possible, but I think every dollar and penny helps out, so
Okay.
I'm going to keep mine. Some people might call that cheap. We're trying to balance the books here.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Sedman?
No.
Mr. Schnee?
No.
Mr. Vogt?
No.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
No.
Ms. Hauk?
No.
Mr. Kelleher?
No.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
7-3. Or 3-7, excuse me.
Motion fails. Going to the solicitor's office. Ms. Berkmo.
I stand by my presentation that was made during executive session on the date that I defended my budget. Having said that, I certainly would be agreeable to the amounts as reflected in the Second Amendment. The Office of Law would be able to work within the parameters of those numbers.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Or
Which second amendment, Mr. Sneed?
Second.
Ms. Wakus?
Just so I'm clear here, I apologize. Is the second amendment is that the budget moves from $675 to $600,000, a cut of $75,000?
Correct.
And so it's not a cut of $600,000?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's just for the solicitors?
Yeah, we're just talking about the solicitor's office, then Mr. Hakem will have his chance to defend his budget for the conflict counsel. So the motion is only in regards to the solicitor's office, 4151, the second line.
Second column.
Column. You're correct. The second column would be a better terminology.
So under special legal services, that's a cut of 70,000?
75,000.
Yeah, 70.
Okay?
Special, I have 320 to 250?
No, you're up, look at solicitor's office, the one above.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not in the conflict counsel.
I'm sorry.
Okay? Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schnee? Yes. Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
No.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Stedman?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
8-2.
8-2, motion carries.
Chair,
Now
I'd like to
moving down
I'd like to
to
propose
the-
another amendment, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me? Sure.
If we could take line item 550.19, special legal services, and shrink that line item down to $175,000, down from the original proposed
And Mr. Haas
$675,000.
makes a proposal to shrink the special legal services from 675 down to 175, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hauk? On the question?
Yeah, on the question, when we look at the $3.1 million that the shortfall is, as proposed in the manager's budget, $675,000 is 22% of that shortfall. And I'm just reflecting what the general public feels about this issue, and this is no reflection on our Office of Law or on Ms. Crocomo whatsoever, but where does the madness stop? That these are our county workers serving the county in many cases, and they're coming back and they're suing the county taxpayers with lawyers, generally speaking, from Luzerne County. And I just think that if we just open up a significant part of the budget to these kind of attacks, we're asking for more. It's almost like we're asking for more people to sue the county. The justification here is because I've been doing this for a few years, and I don't do any of this arbitrarily. I hope you know that, and I hope our staff knows that too. It's no reflection on our staff, but something like this, I think when the time comes and these in some cases ridiculous suits come up, I think it's very important that we have a discussion, that we let the public know that what's going on, and I think rather than just take something from a pot that's there that we prepare for a year out in some cases, put the pressure on at that point. And I think it might go better for us. We might prevail better going forward. So this is not only saving taxpayers money here in the upfront, but also strategically, I just think it's a better approach to go. Secondly, when you look at this past year's budget, 2018, the actuals for that same line item were $289,000 as of October when this was posted. And I remember our solicitor saying that it really hasn't changed much, and some of these cases are going to be pushed into early next year. So again, here we have $300,000 that we could have kept in our pockets last year, but we budgeted, went to the taxpayers, and well, last year there was no tax increase, but nonetheless, we lost out as far as I'm concerned, that line item. So I would much rather depend on when these travesties come. I'd even say a travesty of justice many times, because again, most of these cases are very ridiculous. But nonetheless, we have a reserve account for contingencies like this. Why should we go to the taxpayer and say, okay, let's have a pot of money so people can sue us? To me, it's just ridiculous, and I've seen it happen too many times over these past couple years. What if we could change the strategy up? That's all I just shared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Edmond?
Mr. Huss, I just don't think people know that we have a pot of money that they're able to sue us, special legal counsel. I mean, I don't think it's advertised that sue the county because they have some money for you to get. I don't think that's how it works. And I'm looking at, she said that, we're only at 289 300,000 now, but I mean, we knew it was going up. The year before, the actual amount was 688. And everything's gone up since then. So I don't think it's out of line to be looking at 600,000 as special legal services. Ms. Crocombe, what is exactly the definition of special legal services?
Well, the special legal services are the amounts of money that are earmarked to pay for our deductibles, for our insurance, the attorneys that represent us through the insurance carriers, any kind of contracts or litigation or services by outside counsel. For example, with the TAN, we have outside counsel who processes that. That comes out of the special legal fund. And settlements in cases. If we have to seek opinions from outside counsel, that comes out of the special legal fund. I'm very proud of the lawyers that work for the Office of Law, and we all of the lawyers have worked steadfastly to reduce outside costs to the county, and we've reduced the number of employees who have to the county. That's working very closely with the Human Resources Department. We're doing what we can to prevent that from happening. Unfortunately, we still see a number of cases being brought through the prison, CYS, because they are volatile agencies. We're always going to have those cases that we have to defend, and that's where this legal services fund goes to. I also want to state we are going to trial on a case in January, so I don't know what the outcome of that case is going to be, but we have a trial date, and I have done whatever I can to reduce those costs with outside counsel. I review the invoices and ask for counsel to reduce their fees, and I did make a request that was less than last year's, and I'm proud of all the lawyers that work in my department and the work that they do.
Yeah, I just have to say that having been a corporate counsel, which is not much just different than your job, many times we don't have a choice of taking outside counsel. Our insurance company requires it.
Correct.
And the best that probably Ramilda can do is look at those bills very carefully so they just don't come in and say deposition, but we know how many hours and we know who it was with. And the explanation on the bills is very important, because otherwise you'd be paying things that you really shouldn't be paying for. But I also think that there are some cases, Harry, that are valid. And I think
Oh yeah, I agree that, but many are frivolous.
And I think that there's a validity to some of these cases, just like, you don't, like malpractice cases. Some of them are foolish, but some of them are legitimate. So I think her budget probably is at 600,000 is where it should be.
Which I really appreciate being an attorney, having that background and being here. I really am glad you're at the table. And I just will say with the past, though, here, in years past, we really sunk a lot of money into this, anticipating some very big court cases coming down from the mistakes of the past, and then going forward, and this is going back on the prior administration, going forward with better practices, we would not open ourselves, I'm talking about the county would not open itself up to some more of these type cases. So again, just anticipating success, anticipating improvement, and understand that we have a significant reserve fund that when these contingencies pop up, Office of Law can always come back to the council and ask for this money. Very appropriate sum.
The only thing you gotta say, Harry,
Go ahead.
you said we want to make this smaller so people won't think there's a big pot.
No.
And now you've mentioned the reserve. That's a bigger pot, so.
Well, and that's all fine, Jan, I appreciate that too. But again, when we were doing this in the past, it was with the expectation that we were going to have some pretty big settlements. And that was just what the case was years ago.
Anyone else?
One question.
Yes.
The cases that are out there, that are outstanding, have to be addressed. Is it responsible? Is that a good figure that you provide?
Absolutely, it's a figure that
That's your bottom line?
we can work with that.
That's your bottom line?
Yes.
Anyone else? Roll call, please, on Mr. House's amendment to take the special legal services to a figure of $175,000.
Mr. Vo was the first.
Mr. Vo has texted me and he's lost service. He's trying to come back on, but he's traveling, so we'll go forward.
Ms. Wakus?
No.
Mr. Brominski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
No.
Mr. Perry?
No.
Ms. Sedman?
No.
Mr. Schnee?
No.
Mr. McGinley?
No.
Fails.
Okay, motion fails. We're moving down to Department 4154, Conflict Counsel. Mr. Hakam is at the podium. He's also given us a memo that was in your packet. Take your seat. Mr. Hakam?
Thank you, Mr. McGinley. Hello all, good to see you all again. Hopefully the memo wasn't too long and hopefully I had a chance to look at it. I don't want to beat a dead horse. One thing I will mention right off the top is I am aware that council doesn't go into amendments lightly, and I'm sure a lot of what it's based on is looking at the actual numbers. Although you're in the same boat I am with that, I watch my budget, I don't really want to say religiously, but pretty vigorously and often, and my numbers are never exactly accurate either, because there's, you know, what New World shows, and then there are encumbrances out there that only Budget and Finance sees, and then there are invoices that haven't even made it into the system yet. So it sometimes looks like there's a lot more money left than there is. And additionally, as I point out all the time with special legal especially, that's an estimation. For me, we never know what that's exactly going to be. Out of that fund, I pay some contract attorneys monthly, including my juvenile attorney, my appeals attorney. As we mentioned, I do all of the Post-Conviction Relief Act cases for the county, which Mr. Shikoski mentioned, which are extensive and expensive. That comes out of there. In addition, we pay for half of the non-capital homicides that come to the conflict office, and you never know when that's going to happen. So I will just point out regarding the fluctuation of the numbers, I presented my budget originally with this similar spiel at the end of October. Between that time and the time I drafted the memo yesterday, we got 4 more homicides since October 28th. Since I drafted the memo to today, I got notice that there's going to be another attempted homicide that I'm also inheriting. So I don't make up these numbers. I try to keep it as low as I can. And if you look at me historically, in 2017, my special legal was $450,000. I voluntarily cut it last year to $350,000, and when I proposed it this year, I cut it again to $320,000. I'm not asking for more and more money every year. I'm asking for what I think I need. And regarding that, just looking at the actual numbers, I'd worked with Budget and Finance and my assistant looking at encumbrances and invoices. The 2 amendments regarding special legal are either $100,000 or $250,000 for next year. I am currently, for 2018, at $259,000. So either of those 2 numbers is problematic. And keep in mind, the way I contract for homicides, I'm notoriously stingy. We don't let everyone bill by the hour as they have in years past, where people run up $95,000 bills prior to trial. There is a flat fee, and it's a pretty low fee. And then we'll have a trial fee, so if the case works out, we're not paying them the whole amount. But if they do the extra work and go to trial, there's an extra a few $1,000s to go to trial. So this year thus far, I have 9 homicides, one of which is a triple homicide, the house that was burned down in Laflin area. If all of those cases go to trial, in addition to the numbers I've already indicated, there's another about $23,000 on top of that, so I'm up to almost $300,000. So my number, the 320 is not a crazy number. That's about where I need to be for all of those reasons. And I know that we've heard there's a reserve and you can come back and ask for more money, and that's all well and good for certain things, but the problem we would have is I get an order from a judge that says, give this defendant an attorney. And I have to then contract with an attorney for this homicide to get them to agree to take it for an amount of money and then enter their appearance and do work. In the meantime of all that, there's a person charged with a pretty serious crime, or a very serious crime, sitting in prison without an attorney. So for me to come back to 3 council meetings to try to get money to get this attorney, we have a defendant charged with a crime sitting in our prison who's unrepresented. I don't have to remind anyone the history of Luzerne County. We've had a problem with that with the juvenile court. There's still a case, I think, that's pending with the public defenders regarding unrepresented or insufficient counsel for defendants. That's a problem that we don't want to have. That's potential, as Mr. Haas pointed out, money down the road. If we get sued about that again, that's more money we're paying out. It's way more efficient to budget for it now and pray we don't use it than not budget for it and have a suit next year. Examinations and witnesses in the First Amendment column, there is a proposal to cut that by $10,000, which doesn't sound like a lot, but again, looking at my actual expenditures and encumbrances right now, I am currently at about $47,000 for this year, which would put us at a great deficit if it were cut. Additionally, I would point out I had originally asked for $75,000 for this year, and it was cut to $50,000. I just kept it at $50,000 for next year. But in addition to that $47,000, because of the number of homicides we had, including some that went to trial, I have several outstanding bills, and I'm actually in danger of going over budget for the first time in my going on 5 years in this position in that line item. So I really can't afford anything out of that line item for sure. I would respectfully ask council to think about what these monies are for, my performance within my budget over years past, and no, I wouldn't be asking for it if I didn't need it. I cut my budget numbers when I don't need the money, and I've consistently done that over the last 4 years.
Questions from Mr. Hakem?
Yeah, good, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks for the candor, Mr. Hagen. Really appreciate you. And again, no reflection on you or your office. I just want to be very clear about that. And you make a lot of sense on what you said. I will say regarding the examinations witnesses, 560.17, in 2017 it was $38,000 for the year, so slightly under $40,000. And I know, just like you said before, it's a projection. It's a best guess scenario. You're looking at, it just depends on what crimes happen, what crimes are brought to trial, and I acknowledge that too.
The thing, Mr. Haas, the thing I would want to point out to you, just so you're aware, this line item is a little different for me than it is for the public defender's office. They have a much bigger staff. They have 4 full-time investigators. They have a mental health worker on staff. I have none of that. I contract. I do an RFP every year and have a private investigator that contracts for us who will act as our investigator on all our cases for only, I think, $1,500 per month. So that investigator, who's the only investigator we have, is paid out of that line item. Should we need another investigator because that one is working on a co-defendant, we'd have to pay that investigator out of this line item. Any of the homicides, the investigations for that come out of there, the experts come out of there, which is part of the reason this year why the number is going to be particularly high, and I'm in danger of going over. Just expert fees from the one homicide, I just received a bill about a month ago for $16,000 from one expert, which, again, it's a homicide. We have to provide the defense, and we have to do it. Fortunately, that's split with the courts, but you know, in a $40,000 or $50,000 line item, $8,000 is a big chunk of money. So again, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to point that out.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the dialogue. So just regarding your private investigator, is that position on retainer? Is that just a flat fee monthly?
It's a flat, we put out an RFP for an investigator
The whole year.
of the people that come in, and then we do that every 6 months so that
Every
we can
6
evaluate, so if it's not working out, we can get somebody different.
Sure.
And it's, yeah, again, $1,500 flat fee per month.
But so it sounds like a pretty fixed cost then, what
Yeah,
you're
and
saying
it's-
with that. And that's about half of what your budget is there. Okay.
Yeah.
What else? We have a motion. Anyone would like to make a motion in regards to the conflict council budget? Silence. Ms. Hageman.
I'm going to make a motion after Mr. Hakim's really clear memo, the obligations he's under statutorily. I'm going to make a motion that his proposed budget is accepted.
So the proposed budget. Ms. Saban makes that motion. Do we have a second? Hearing none, the motion fails. Do we have an additional motion in regards to Mr. Akeham's conflict council budget?
Make a motion to bring special legal services to 300.
Okay, you're just one line item, Mr. Sneed? Mr. Sneed makes a motion in regards to 55015, special legal services, to propose that number to be 300,000. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second it.
Mr. Perry?
That's 55019, if I'm correct.
55019.
19.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
With no other changes, is that what he's saying?
Well, no, he's just one line item he's making a motion for. 550.19, special legal services. On the question? Roll call, please.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
No.
Ms. Hauk?
No.
Mr. Kelleher?
No.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
5 to 4.
5
Yes,
to 4. We need a majority, we need 6.
Mm-hmm.
Motion doesn't carry because it's a 5-4 motion.
Don't we have, oh, Mr. Bo's not?
Yes,
Oh,
he's not connected.
It's not connected on.
We have 9 members voting there, it's 5-4, which means it does not pass. We need a majority of 6. Do we have any other motions? If not, we'll move forward, and this will be something that we can revisit next week.
You need a majority of council or a majority of those present?
I think majority of council,
Council.
correct?
Current council.
Okay. Thank you. Budget and Finance, Division 20.
I only have a few lines that I'd like to comment on, and then we can move forward from there. So the wages represented, I think we've said before, I understand the question about some positions that were created during the year or changed during the year. We have a person actively doing that, and we would have to take people out of looking at permits and put them back on pictometry. You've heard from the manager before, and you'll hear again tonight after this vote, how pictometry has brought in millions of assessed value and saved the county about $85,000.
So that's under expenses for the assessor's office?
Yes.
510.20.
Yeah, so I would respectfully keep that a propose. That's probably my biggest one for assessor, but wages per diem, that's what the board gets paid to hear the hearings. We've been at 15,000, we've been at 17,000. I get it's a small number, but again, we have to pay for whatever hearings come in. The other, and I talked to Mr. Alu, all the other things for assessor, I have no issue with. So it's really those 2 lines that I'm questioning. Really wages represent it, but there is some rationale behind the per diem of why I'd like to keep the 20,000.
Okay. So in regards to Department 4136 assessors, you've heard Mr. Sweats' comments in that regard. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to have a motion to accept all of the amendment changes in column 1 under First Amendment.
Mr. Haas makes a motion to accept all the changes proposed under the First Amendment, column 1. Do we have a second?
Yes.
On the question,
On the question.
could you please mention again what you said about 510.20 wages represented? Why you want to keep it the same versus
Sure.
dropping it to 445?
So
please?
510.20 wages represented is our represented union employees. There's an employee currently doing this job. The position was posted. The position is bringing in money because they're working on pictometry. So we would be telling a current employee they no longer have a job or have to find money for the job, and they're paying for themselves because now we have people out in the field. I think when we talked during my budget presentation, obviously it's one of the offices that brings in a lot of money. You've heard me talk before how roughly 85 to 87% of the budget is taxes. So if I've got to take an assessor out of the field to work on pictometry, when I currently have a body doing the job and doing the job well, that's an issue.
Okay, Mr. Keller?
I want to be clear. If council cuts this, we're going to have to lay somebody off.
I think that was clear.
Okay.
When were they hired?
This year, I think, right?
This
Correct?
year, about 3-4 months ago.
About midway through the year. Mr. Haas?
Yeah, my issue, this happened a couple times over this past year, that we have these positions that pop up that were not approved by the council. I have a significant issue with that, because essentially that is our main job here, to hold the purse strings for the public, and these surprises that come through there, I'm being a little dramatic here, not necessarily surprises, but they show up in the middle of the year, and we're not briefing sufficiently on it. And really, what are we just marking time here for things like this? It does, it upsets me very much. And yeah, I understand that these are human beings. I went through 2012. I had to vote for people to lay people up. It was horrible. It was a horrible experience. I don't want to repeat that again. And when we add these positions, that puts us in a very unfair position, because initially, I didn't support that from the get-go. Secondly, if this position is yielding money, then where is the other savings in the budget? Why are we not saving somewhere else? That makes absolutely no sense to me. So again, the whole purpose of this is to get more efficiency, get more savings, yet we're seeing more money out the door, and then we're putting a rock in a hard place because somebody's livelihood is on the line. It's terrible.
Mr. Sweats?
I think to Mr. Haas's point, you're not seeing savings on the expense side, but you're seeing additional revenue come in the door. So, you know, these are the, besides other income, and I have the book with me if anyone wants to go through the budget book, you have yours. There's additional money coming in the tax line, being we have additional properties being found through the project. That brings in additional tax revenue. So there's no expenditure reduction, but there is extra revenue coming in for this position.
It's in the tax collection.
It's in the tax, yes, in the tax collection line.
Anyone else?
Yeah, one more question,
Yes.
please. So you're talking about a salary of 30-some thousand?
With benefits, that's
$22,750.
that $22,750 is what the employee makes. It's a union position.
Okay, and then what do you project they bring in?
This, not just this person, but this project's brought in over 80,000 this year. This person's been on it for, we said, around 3 months. So even if you take 3 months out of, you know, a quarter of it, that covers that position for this year, even coming in that late in the year.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may too.
Yes.
I hear these arguments that, oh, we have this extra money in the middle of the budgetary year. How is that possible? We haven't seen the whole year through yet. And then we have extra monies to hire new people in the middle of the year.
Anyone else? We have a motion on the floor.
How many
Sure.
people do you have doing this person's work with that person? Only one?
So over in assessors, there's 5 people that go out in the field. There's actually 3 trainees. So a trainee means we hired you and you didn't get your license yet. They have up to 2 years or 3 years. It's per HR and per our department to get the license. So when you don't have your license and you can't go out and place value on a property, we have you look at the pictometry program and do things in the office to say, okay, when an assessor goes out to Salem Township or Dallas Township, there's also a pictometry project. We think there may be a garage here. We think there may be an above-ground pool. So that's what this job does. Will some work get done if this position is eliminated? Absolutely, but we're pulling somebody out of the field that's primary job is to look at permits, to bring in value to now sit in the office and enter data entry and look at a computer screen.
And I guess my question is about from Mr. Haas is, why didn't we know about this person?
Well, you didn't know about it because per the administrative code, county administration has to inform county council 5 days prior to creating a position. So every position that we discussed, and this is one of the positions that we created in the middle of the year, was informed to county council via email. 5 days goes by. We then post the position for 2 weeks. During that time period, all applications are received. We then interview the top 3 applicants. During that time, we make that determination as to who's going to be in that position. That usually takes about a week or 2 from there. And then, obviously, that person starts. We give that person notice that they're going to start. They normally provide 2 weeks' notice to their previous job. So by the time county council, after I inform county council of a new position, normally about 6 to 8 weeks go by. And I understand Mr. Haas's point. Believe me, I get it. And I've made the position, my position regarding the number of employees that we have, and you'll notice that I've been trying to cut back on any new positions in the 2018 budget, and I haven't asked for any new positions in the 2019 budget. But from our side of things, from the administration side of things, we inform county council that this is out there. 2 weeks go by, another 2 weeks go by, we hire somebody, that person goes by. If county council has an issue with any of those that hire, I would assume they'd be making an amendment to the budget at a council meeting, or at least bring it up during a council meeting to say, Mr. Pedri, what's going on with this new position, before we hire somebody.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I could just comment on that and, answer and maybe clarify something, Ms. Sabin. I was the person that made the amendment to the administrative code to require that notice to council. And I pay attention to when we get those notices. And several times this year, I did ask to have more information provided to us when we're notified of the creation of a position. Because usually what we get is a statement saying that this position will be created and there will be no change. It will not affect the 2018 budget.
Correct.
Or the 2018 general fund. And I have asked a couple times to have the salary, to say we're creating the job at this salary, and to let us know so that we can look ahead and say, it may not affect the 2018 budget, because sometimes you have positions that were vacant in your department or something, and you might have other salary money that is available, and it might not impact the 2018 budget, but it's going to show up in the 2019 position budget. And so there again is, and I did ask that, Mr. McGinley said that he was discussing with the manager how those notices would be provided to us. But there again, it would be very enlightening if we saw the position budget in the format where we saw what position was there last year and how much the position was funded at. And when it was, so that you know what was created in the 2018 year. Compared to what we're going into in 2019.
Because I've read all the positions,
right,
and it says there's not going to be any change to the budget. To the
right, but a couple times you might have seen my email asking, well, what was the salary, and we need to have the information, a little more specific information than just that this position was created and it won't impact 2018. Because, and I believe in one of my emails I even said it may impact 2019, and we should be aware of that.
Yeah, and listen, I believe it will be a process. I think it will be a process. So if county administration does create a position in 2019, I would just ask county council to, if there are questions, bring it up at a public meeting or send me an email or something along those lines, because I don't want to hire somebody and then find out at the budget time that council doesn't support this individual. And that's my concern. I understand the hirings are my decision, and your budget, you make a decision with regard to the budget. It's a very difficult decision. And if you decide to, hey, listen, this isn't something we support, Dave, I fully understand that, and that is your position. But going forward, when I send out those things, if you don't like it, please let me know then, and we can maybe hash it out ahead of time prior to getting to this point next year.
Well, perhaps you could provide more information when you send out that notice, such as what the salary is,
sure,
what the cost is.
Got it.
I think this person's doing one heck of a job. I really do. I'll support it. because I know the assessment on my house went up $28,000. So he must have been doing a heck of a job with his pictometry, and I want to find out what kind of pictures he took. But I will support this.
That's not a spot reassessment. I want to be very clear.
Okay, you get back to the work at hand. We have a motion from Mr. Haas, second by Ms. Seidman, for the items listed under the First Amendment for the Department of Assessors 4136. That's what we have as a motion, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
So,
Go ahead.
point of order. No, we're considering the First Amendment revenue and expenses. are
Correct.
we not? Okay, the whole.
Correct. Yeah, the whole department. Okay.
Can I make an amendment to that motion?
You can always make an amendment.
I'd like to amend it so that we accept everything under revenue expenses and not the part where we're dropping the 478, 187 to 445, keeping the 478, 187 the same. That's my amendment.
We have a second to Mr. Keller's amendment. Mr. Perry?
I have a question.
Questions on that?
Yeah, Brian, you had said that getting rid of, moving that down, 427,000, that you would have to find the money somewhere, okay? Is there room to find the money somewhere? I mean, do you have money that you could find?
To move in expenses, I guess I need some clarification. Are you asking, do I have money for this position?
I'm asking if we took the 478, 187, and moved it to 445, 437, which is basically that 22,750, you have money somewhere?
Even if I did, I don't think I could. I guess you would argue you're eliminating a position and I'd be creating a position. I couldn't do a budget transfer to create a position. So I think we'd be in the position of, once the position's eliminated, it's eliminated for 2018 and 2019.
Well, it'll be 2019 budget.
2019 budget.
Correct. Okay, Ms.
Well,
Seidman?
I don't think that's strictly true, because I know specifically of positions that were not funded in the 2018 budget but were created in mid-year.
I think he said that. I think what he said was, obviously, there's a disagreement on how those positions should be created, and he doesn't want to get back into that. I believe that's, is that correct?
Yes. Again, I respect council's decision, just like everyone else.
Okay.
I believe I should have hired Mr. Hakem and kept him at the podium, but I said it's 2020.
Not everyone will agree on that either. So we have Mr. Kelleher's amendment to the Mr. Haas's motion, second by Mr. Perry. Okay? And that would, deals just with the solely one line item, 51020, wages represented, and Mr. Kelleher's amendment would maintain the 478, 187.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelleher's amendment.
Mr. Kelleher's amendment.
Mr. Brzezinski.
No. No.
Mr. Haas.
No.
Ms. Hauk.
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher.
Yes.
Mr. Perry.
Yes.
Ms. Sedman.
No.
Mr. Schnee.
Yes.
Ms. Wakes.
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes.
3 noes and
6 yes.
6 yeses.
The amendment passes 6-3. So we got, now we'll go forward with Mr. Haas's motion, second by Ms. Seidman, with the amendment so that the wages represented stays at the 478, 187. Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas.
Yes.
Ms. Hauk.
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher.
Yes.
Mr. Perry.
Yes.
Ms. Sedman.
Yes.
Mr. Schnee.
Yes.
Ms. Wakes.
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski.
No.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes.
9-1.
9-1, motion carries. Moving on to tax collection, Mr. Sweats.
Sure. So tax collections, obviously we had a big discussion about that. Again, payment in lieu of taxes, we talked about revenue and trying to collect a line item. Refunds, we were at 550,000 budget. A couple years ago, we were at 750,000. We cut it to 500. 450 is going to be tight. It's obviously council's purview. 400 we've spent the last couple of years. So I spent 420 last year. I'm at 375 now. There's been Decembers where we had $100,000. So Amendment 1 for that line is going to be very tight. Again, we gave you the proposed budget with our rationale, and you have the purse strings.
Okay. Just to point out that the line for the revenue, 405.28, that's a reduction in revenue, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, and again, Mr. Chair, I suggest that because, again, my heart of hearts, I'm not making arbitrary cuts just a way to get cheap revenue or to just cut and blow everything up. That's not my interest. And it just seems like Mr. Sweat said, it's probably going to be really tough to hit that, that 250,000. So that's my rationale for that one.
Okay.
Would rather it be not the case, but that's what it seemed like there.
Do we have
and
a
the
motion?
Other ones, yeah.
Sorry.
Do you want to take that separately, Mr. Chair? The revenue and the expense
That's fine.
items? Or?
You have a motion for the revenue?
Sure.
Mr. Haas?
Yeah, I'll move that.
Do we have a second to that?
Yes.
Ms. Sedgman? Only on the revenue line item, payment in lieu of taxes. The proposed number is 250,000. That would move the number down to 200,000, correct?
Question, please.
Yes.
What's your comment on that? Do you think the 250 was possible or
I think the
realistic?
I think the 250 is a little aggressive. I think 200 is more realistic.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Does 225 sound better?
Make whatever amendment you'd like.
Any other questions? We have a motion on the revenue line item. Mr. Haas, second by Ms. Segman, to go from 250,000 proposed to 200,000 amended. Roll call, please.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
8-1.
8-1, motion carries. Moving down to the expenses, refunds. The proposed number is 500,000. We have two amendments, one for 400,000, one for 450,000.
I'd like to move the 400,000 figure, Mr. Chair. I'll
Haas?
speak on that if I get a second.
Do we have a second for Mr. Haas's motion? Ms. Hauk? On the question?
If I could, Mr. Chairman? Yeah, if you look at the 2017 actuals, and again, we're on in line item, well, it's right here, 59014, the refunds. It was 415,000, about 416,000 in 2017. This year, it's 330,000 as of October. And forgive me, Mr. Swets, what'd you say the current?
We're up to about 360. I think it's 359.
359.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
But we go into February.
Correct. Refunds is one of the line items that goes until February. It goes through the accrual period. A lot of the expense lines really stop. We have invoices. December is more of a hard stop, or even January. But even the refunds that are in February for refunds end up in this year. So you're really doing March to February, not January to December.
Okay. All right, yeah, that's helpful.
19, no, March 19 to February of 20.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
I think I remember that Hazel Township meeting that we were at, and we spoke about these refunds, and it has been trending downward over these past few years. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully the nightmare will end soon. But these surprises keep on coming up, but it was an anticipated surprise, and we have budget for that. I know it's tight. Nobody likes a tight pair of pants, Mr. Sweats, but we do like a tight budget. So I had hoped that we can strive for that, and I'd like to keep that as it stands.
Okay, so we have a motion for the $400,000 figure, second by Ms. Hauk.
On the question.
On the question.
Mr. Sweat's comment was that 400's really tight, 450 is more reasonable?
I believe 450 is reasonable. Again, I'll stand by my proposal, but I realize council has a difficult job. They have to control the purse strings. I believe 450 we can live within. 400, so we went over before. Even if we get 417, 425, 430, we'll be over budget. So if council makes an amendment, I would suggest amendment 2.
Okay. We have a motion for the first amendment. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelleher?
No.
Mr. Perry?
No.
Ms. Sedman?
No.
Mr. Schnee?
No.
Ms. Wakes?
No.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
No. Motion fails.
Correct.
I'll make a motion for the 450, please.
Motion for the Second Amendment, which is $450,000. Mr. Kelleher, do we have a second to that?
Yes.
Ms. Segman? On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Passes.
Motion carries. Moving down to the Treasurer's Office.
I'm fine with the amendments. I talked to Ms. Beers, I talked to the staff in the Treasurer's Office. We realized the rental land, we had some land we were renting to two individuals that were in the process of changing. Also, the indirect revenue, we had said we thought was inflated. So as presented, all three amendments, we have no objection to for Treasurers. The one on the first
one is
page.
under Treasurers and the other two under General?
I'm sorry, under General Government, yes. The next three we're fine with.
Okay.
Treasurers and General Government.
So we have, you're okay with those three?
Yes.
Amendment as proposed?
Yes.
So move.
Mr. Kelleher, this is in regards to the Treasurer's Department, which is 4139, and General Government Operations, which is 4176. Mr. Kelleher made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Perry. On the question. Roll call, please. Where? No. Mr. Swets is at the podium.
Well, it's concerning that line item.
Well, Mr. Swets is your person.
I request that we hear what Mr. Parsnick has to say.
Anybody
I'll
else?
second that request.
Okay.
if need be.
Mr. Parsnick, from the podium, please.
My whole concern is, does this have to deal with tourism and the hotel tax raising the revenue that was in the budget of tourism, or is this the separate item that comes in aside from the hotel tax that tourism gets on the piece?
We're not there yet.
You're not there yet.
I just want,
So wages per diem fees.
Yeah,
okay.
you're not there.
Well, I saw the,
No, we are there.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the hotel
Yes.
tax or the
Thanks.
tourism convention. Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Keller made the motion. Mr. Perry seconded that motion on the Treasurer's Office, 4139, General Government Operation 4176. Okay? Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
To clarify, just the wages per diem line item, that's the amendment, that's the budget amendment we're making?
That's one of the three items. The Treasurer's Office, which is the wages per diem that you talked about, and the next page is General Government.
Department 4139.
Next page,
That's, we're not doing the 4176, are we?
Yes, we are.
We are?
That's what I'm asking, because
Well, that's why I said that
that's
three
what Mr.
times.
Parsnick was talking about.
It was two departments, Treasurers, and General Government. And that was Mr. Keller's motion, second by Mr. Perry.
If I'm not mistaken, that was what Mr. Parsnick wanted to talk about. He was just told that.
That had nothing to do, Mr.
Had nothing to do with
Parsnick's
this.
comment had nothing to do with these two items, with these items.
Okay, all right, then I'll vote yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes,
Unanimous.
unanimous. Thank you. Now we're at Administrative Services. Mr. Parsnick. Department 4113, Human Services.
That should be Human Resources.
Human Resources, correct? Human Resources, should be the proper title. Mr. Parsnick, in regards to human resources?
We have no issues with that.
No issues?
With the human resources piece.
Very good. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Mr. Kelleher, do we have a second? Ms. Wakes, on the question. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Hauk?
Just to be clear, this is the Department 4113 Human Resources, right?
Correct.
Okay, not Human Services?
Yeah.
Right, we corrected that, yes.
Okay. All right, yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Moving down to 4120, Bureau of Elections. Mr. Parsnick?
You have some comments? So our election inspector would like to comment on some of her proposals.
Hello. How's everybody tonight? So I just wanted to touch base on a few of the items. Wages overtime, 510.35. We've currently, after this past election, expended over $6,000 in overtime. So we've already exceeded Amendment 1 and 2 for overtime for employees. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Office supplies, we've expended 99% of that budget line item, which was
the proposed budget line item.
of $4,000 for 2018.
Okay.
Okay. Mileage reimbursement. If you look at our current expenditures, during reconciliation, I discovered there was about $800 that was not applied correctly. And once we make that change, we're actually going to be $600 over budget in mileage. That was due to an increase in rover dispatching on election day due to voter turnout and calibration issues with the voting machines. If we do plan on having new voting systems in 2019, we're going to see a higher increase of rover calls being dispatched on election day. So what we typically would have spent around $2,000 in mileage, that's definitely going to be increased. We also have to take into consideration any mileage that we're going to have to use in order to train our poll workers and conduct any voter outreach. So I'd like you to reconsider that number as well. Advertising, the $12,000 second amendment, that's doable. Typically, I do like to advertise more than once when there's polling place changes, but we're only required by law to advertise that one time. So if we advertise that one time instead of multiple times, we can meet that $12,000 amendment. Printing, I proposed $65,000. I see that the second amendment is $60,000. If we could meet somewhere in the middle at like $62,500, I know that's my middle, we need to look at multiple things. Printing isn't just the ballots. There are sample ballots. We're looking at any applications that we need to order. Remember, the Department of State only provides us voter registration applications. Absentee ballot applications, it's all out of county funds. If Senator Fulmer's proposed no excuse absentee bill actually passes in 2019, then we're looking at changing those those absentee ballot applications, and then our absentee ballots themselves are going to increase as well. So that's another consideration. The meeting, conference, and training fees, the second amendment of $3,000. If I take out the Lorman staff training services in 2019, we can meet that $3,000 amendment. Transfers to individuals, as of today, we've expended our current 2018 budget by 97%. That was decreasing the number of office seasonal people, but we did have to implement 2 seasonal individuals for poll worker training of our electronic poll books. That being said, if we're going to be training for new voting systems, we're not just going to be training 800 poll workers, we're looking at 1,000 poll workers, and then trying to do as much training and outreach for our voters.
You didn't speak to the first line item?
I was kind of skipping that one. I think I've pled my case of that position. We had a successful student poll worker launch in 2018. That was with the efforts of that new position. We already have her scheduled for Toss Your Hat in the Ring for the 2019 municipal election cycle. We plan on having campaign finance outreach, and we're also really trying to get voter registration initiatives launched in our school districts. And we were able to decrease the number of seasonal people in the office this past election due to that position as well. So I'd like you to reconsider that as well.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'd like to move, Mr. Chair, that we take all the amendments in amendment 1 column.
Mr. Haas,
printed.
Amendment is from the first column, correct? Do we have a second for Mr. Haas?
Second.
Second, Ms. Hauk? On the question.
On the question, the position was started in this past year, this year.
Correct.
And it was gone through the procedure you described before, Mr. Pedri?
Correct.
So we all had a chance to view that and look at that and critique it and so forth, right? Okay, thank you.
If I could comment on that?
Yes.
During last year's budget, Mr. Kelleher, we specifically did not fund that position, and it was created in 2018 anyway. The position was under discussion during last year's budget, just like all these positions are now. We voted not to fund it, and it was created anyway.
I'm not trying to start an argument. Do you wish to comment on that, Mr. Pedri?
Yeah.
Or?
I mean, we saw a need for that position. We had the money in our budget in order to cover that position for 2018, and we moved forward with it. We informed County Council of that. We had heard no rumblings regarding this or objections regarding this until obviously the budget process as started from the very beginning. So once again, we have a woman in this job. She was here at the one meeting where we presented. We hired this individual. She's doing a really good job. In addition, we just received a whole bunch of new student poll workers from that Boy Scouts program where Stephen Greenwald went to go talk to. So this individual will be involved with training them and doing some voter outreach on those things. And Ms. Crispell?
And also the individual that's in that position currently she was actually hired in June as an inspector, and when this position was opened, she applied for the new position. So she gave up a union position for this position.
Again, like all things, this is absolutely no reflection on Ms. Crispell or the Office of Bureau of Elections. I think you do a bang job, I really do. Again, just what Ms. Hauk said, we had the debate on this last year. We said no, and suddenly a new position is created. That is a significant problem. Secondly, with this council, and I voted along with the majority too, to support poll books last year. $250,000, $250,000 we spent to make the office more efficient, to cut down on the need for extra overtime staff, to cut down on paperwork, to yield savings. And now I look here that the proposed budget is an increase of $150,000. Okay, that's like 20% increase over last year's budget. Thirdly, the voting machines coming up. That's not a foregone conclusion yet. I can't support that until I definitively see federal and state monies. But that is a lot of the excess in this budget is anticipating new voting machines. We are putting the cart before the horse. This council has not approved that yet. And lastly, that position too, regardless of the effectuality of it, of how good a job she's doing, we don't need a get out the vote program here in Luzerne County. We already have that. It's called Hollywood. Taylor Swift gets out the vote. Alyssa Milano gets out the vote. They're always saying rock the vote. We don't need that here. We don't need to pay taxpayer money to get more people out to vote. We want efficient elections that are fair, safe, and secure. And any teacher that teaches high school civics, if they're worth their salt, they are going to help get their kids excited to register, and they would take on that position. They really would. We don't need a full-time person for that. We're looking at ways that we can volunteer, we can have community members come on and help out the situation. This is something we're spending money on. We do not need this, and council definitively said we don't need this last budget year. So again, I encourage my colleagues to really look at this. We've made the savings. We anticipated savings and better efficiency, and we're not seeing it here.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I want to be very clear on one thing. County administration and myself personally absolutely disagree with Mr. Haas's statement that county elections, it's not our job to get out the vote. It is our job. Running an election is exactly what the county needs to be doing, along with public safety and a lot of other things. I understand budgetary things, but I, for one, will not be relying upon Taylor Swift to make sure that the Luzerne County voters get out to vote. That's something that we need to do. We're the government. We're the county government. We run elections. We saw a need for this particular position to assist us in that. And oh, by the way, in the 2018 election, we had a 52% turnout. I like to think a little piece of that was this position. I think a little piece of that was the good work that we do here in Luzerne County. So I don't rely on Hollywood, Mr. Haas, and I agree with a lot of your statements. And I understand your budgetary issues, but in no way, shape, or form are we in agreement on whose job it is to get the vote out.
Yeah, I don't rely on Hollywood either, and I will say I think people came out because they're extremely disappointed in government across the board. And I think this council can build back credibility by having a fiscally sound budget.
Ms. Criswell, you have a comment?
And I do agree with Mr. Haas regarding the increase in the budget. It is in anticipation of getting new voting systems, which we have to be prepared for because we were mandated. So I'm doing what I can to ensure that we're able to fulfill our duty as the guardians of democracy in elections and to be able to provide fair elections to those voters.
Anyone else? I'll offer amendment that we change the advertising to the second line, which would be $12,000, printing to $60,000, and the meeting conference training fees to $3,000. That would be an amendment to Mr. Haas's motion. Do we have a second to that?
Would you repeat that, please?
Advertising, 550.30 to a $12,000 figure instead of 7.
Okay.
Printing to $60,000 instead of 30,000 as proposed in line 1, or column 1, excuse me. And meeting conference training fees to 3,000 versus the 2,000 in column 1.
And wages overtime?
I'm fine with either one, but
Okay.
my amendment just covers those 3. Advertising, printing, meeting conference training.
What
I'll
did you
second
say
that.
advertising was? I'm sorry.
Advertising,
Yes.
printing, meeting conference training.
Yeah, but what did you say you were changing advertising to?
12,000. Second column.
The second column, okay.
All 3 of them from the second column. Saving. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Keller,
On the question,
on the question?
I'd like to make an amendment and move that 51015 back to 125.
Well, let's vote on this one, then you can make that amendment to that. Okay? That's fine. Any other questions on those 3 items in that amendment? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schnee.
Advertising, printing, and meeting conference training to move them to the second column.
Yes.
Ms. Winkes.
Yes.
Mr. Berminski.
No.
Mr. Haas.
No.
Ms. Hauk.
No.
Mr. Kelleher.
Yes.
Mr. Perry.
Yes.
Ms. Sedman.
Yes.
Mr. McGinley.
Yes. 6-3, motion carries. Mr. Perry?
Yes. I would like to restore 51015 wages non-representative back to 125, 585.
Okay. Do we have a second for Mr. Perry?
Second.
Mr. Keller? On the question? Roll call, please.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
No.
Ms. Hauk?
No.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
No.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
You don't have the majorities, 4 to 5?
No majority. The amendment does not pass. Any other amendments to Mr. Haas's motion, seconded by Ms. Hauk? Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
No.
I'm sorry, what are we voting on?
We're voting on Mr. Haas's motion that you seconded with the amendment that passed, which regards advertising, printing, meeting, conference, and training fees.
Okay, so everything else in the first column, First Amendment column would stand.
Stay the
except for
same,
those
the way
three.
it's listed.
Okay,
Okay?
sure. Yes.
Mr. Haas, you're yes or no?
I'm voting for those changes, for the First Amendment, first column of changes.
First
With
column?
the amendment that passed.
With the 3 that passed, right.
Okay, so you're yes.
I am a yes.
And Mr. Haas, you were no?
I'm a no. It's still too fat.
And Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
And Mr. McGinley?
No.
3 noes and 6 yeses.
Motion carries. 6-3. Moving down to information technology, 4172. Mr. Parsnick?
Wait, could we go back to the next one?
Could we go back?
I'm on medication, so.
Yeah, I know you're ill.
If my understanding, Mr. McGinley, is that the last amendment was to cut wages not represented from 125 to 585 to 93, meaning that individual, that the salary for that individual, for that position we talked about, is going to be cut. And then wages overtime was moved to 3,000, office supplies to 4,000, mileage reimbursement to 1,000, advertising to 12,000, printing to 60,000, meeting conference training fees to 3,000, and then transfers to individual to 15,000. Is that correct, Mr. McGinley?
That's all correct.
And I screwed up my vote, too. I'm not on medication either.
Well, we have to have because of the fact that was voted on and we had a decision on that, we have to go back and people who voted for that would have to ask for a request. And so the people who voted yes for that motion could make a request to revisit that.
I'd like to make that request.
So Mr. Kelleher makes that request to go back to that motion. Do we have a second for Mr. Kelleher?
Second.
Second, Mr. Schnee. Now, this is only to revisit the motion that is just passed, okay?
Also change my vote, too.
Well, you're going to have a chance now. Mr. Keller made the motion to go back to revisit the motion that had just passed in regards to the items in column 1 with the amendment that passed regarding Bureau of Elections. Okay? So all people who would like to go back to that motion and revisit that, you would vote yes. If you do not want to go back to that motion, you vote no. Okay? Mr. Keller made the motion. Mr. Snee made the second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas?
No.
Ms. Hauk?
No.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
No.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
And Mr. McGinley?
Yes. 5-4?
Yep.
5-4, not a majority. The motion does not carry. Moving on to information technology.
So,
Mr. Parsnick?
while we believe that training is important and we're going to focus on training for our employees this year, we'll be able to live with that number that you provided in the Second Amendment.
Okay.
And we have no issue with computer software.
Okay. You heard Mr. Parsnick? Do we have a motion in regards to information technology? Mr. Snee makes a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Wakes. On the question?
I have a question. Did you say you abide by the Second Amendment? Because we don't have a Second Amendment, we just have a...
No, he said that he
sorry.
has no issues with the amendments, I believe.
With the amendment.
No, I was looking at, I thought there were two amendments on that. It's the First Amendment. It's the
First Amendment.
10,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Questions? Roll call.
Ms. House?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakes?
Yes.
Mr. Gravinsky?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. 8-1, motion carries. Okay. Correctional Services. Mr. Rakovich, you want to go through the Correctional Services Administration, Department 4233?
The only comment that I have on it is 550.83, the outside inmate housing. When I inherited the budget in 2016, the amount of the budget for that line item was approximately $550,000, and it had been for previous years. Between 16 and 17, when I started to control it, I took that down by 36.5%. For 17 to 18, I reduced that number by 20.9%, once again, which is savings. What I'm asking is just that council realize if the case emerges where we would need to hit the reserve fund for that, I would be requesting that.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Snee, seconded by Ms. Seidman.
Yes.
On the question? We're just talking about Department 4233, Correctional Administration. On the question, Mr. Perry.
What are we at now?
Right now, 45,000 roughly.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The concern with this particular line item, as we've discussed here in the past, is that if there is ever an issue, and Mr. Rakovich watches this, and believe me, he doesn't send anybody out unless he absolutely positively has to. You know, the issue is that if we have to send somebody out, we're going to have to send somebody out whether or not the budget is there. And then we're going to have to come back to county council and over a 6-week period sit down with everybody and go over to where we're at. I believe Mr. Rakovich has should have earned your respect by now to say this is a proper number, this is where he's been. He's been watching his budget. It's been cut down from $550,000 2 years ago to $275,000. And I think that is a reasonable request. He lives within his budget. He watches the numbers very, very closely at the correctional facility, and you know, I think that the council should not be making this amendment. And if they do make the amendment, just be ready for a potential reserve request if we do need it, because it's going to come down to safety, Mr. Rakovich. Is that correct?
If it comes down to safety, I'm going to have to make the determination to send people out, whether I have the money there or not.
Well, first of all, Mr. Petrie, everybody says 6 weeks. If you come to council at a work session and then follow up with 2 additional meetings, that's 4 weeks, number one. Number two, I would hope every person sitting out there who's division head or department head or whatever position they serve, if they watch their budget very closely. I mean, that's a given. We all know Luzerne County is not blessed with a large number of revenue sources. So I think it behooves all of us to be very careful about the budget and make every effort to use the budget in an appropriate manner. We have a motion from Mr. Snee, second by Ms. Saban, to support the amendments in column number 1. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes.
8-1.
8-1, motion carries. Moving down to minimum offenders unit, Mr. Rakovich.
550.45, repairs, maintenance, building. The amendment is a $8,000 reduction. Currently, we are at 98% of our budget for 2018's line item. I am requesting that council reconsider it. That building is starting to age. We do have some problems on it. I don't have any estimates, but we do have repairs that are needed to those buildings.
The current budget is what figure?
The current budget on that is 33.
32?
33.
30, yep. Is that the 2018 budget figure or proposed?
Proposed, I'm sorry.
So you said you spent 98% of this year's budget. What is the bid?
2018, which was 28,000.
Okay. 28,000. Do we have a motion?
We're looking at 4234 only?
4234 only, minimum offenders unit. Those 4 line items.
And you've spent what amount so far?
About $28,000
$28,000.
in the 550.45.
I make a motion to accept the items as stated, except for the 25,000, and change that to 29,000.
Mr. Keller's motion is we accept the 540.43 proposed amendment, 550.43 proposed amendment, 550.45 repairs and maintenance building, change that to 29,000, 560.64 meeting conference training fees, the proposed amendment. That was Mr. Kelleher's motion. Do we have a second to that? Mr. Schnee? On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. 8-1, motion carries. Moving down to Department 4235, LCCF.
We believe that we can live with the amendments that...
No issues with those amendments as proposed?
Correct.
Mr. Snee makes that motion. Do we have a second from Ms. Saban? On the question? Roll call, please.
Ms. Sedman?
Yes.
Mr. Schnee?
Yes.
Ms. Wakus?
Yes.
Mr. Berminski?
No.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. McGinley?
Yes. Do we need to take a recess for a break?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. It's 8:15. We'll reconvene at 8:25. Thank you. I think everybody needs a break. Yeah, but you know, you can tell they're getting tired. What'd you say? Oh.